Today we're going to install a Texas Weapons Systems dogleg, which is a new system to replace this whole dust cover. Before we begin, double checking that this is empty, and it is. Step number one then, according to the instructions, is to remove the existing rear sight. Do that. I'm going to place this here to catch things. This has a little bit of spring pressure underneath it, and then we'll remove that with a flat tip screwdriver and a mallet.
Mess it up.
There, I did her. Excellent. Now we need to remove the leaf.
Pull that out with your hand.
The leaf spring.
Okay.
Well, it says
Thought you could.
to remove it with the pliers.
I guess it is too hard.
Yeah, it's a spring, so it's under pressure. All right. See if we can get down in there. So I've removed that leaf spring, and now we can see we've got some crud that's cosmoline stuck inside there. We'll get that cleaned out before we proceed any further. Now you might be wondering, this is kind of an odd contraption, you may be thinking. We've got a wooden top of this handguard and a plastic ATI bottom of it. We had some problems with that ATI configuration. The picatinnies just kind of popped off. All the screws loosened up, even though we had Loctite on them. So for the time being, we've removed the ATI top part of the handguard and put the original wood furniture back on this. We're going to replace the whole thing here in the not too distant future with some Midwest Industries universal handguard. So that's what's going on with that. Now back to this. Okay, now this piece here is called the nut plate. You'll notice when you look at this thing that there's a very thin side right over here, and what I'll call the thicker side on the opposite. This thin side is going to be installed just like this, with what I call the thin side toward the dust cover, the thick side toward the handguard. Just like that. Okay, now we're going to remove that original dust cover. We already got it kind of removed, and we'll pull it out of the way. Okay, now this is the hinge base. We're going to install it and screw it down into that. We're going to screw that down into the nut plate. We're going to use some Loctite. They're recommending Loctite Blue, which is exactly what we have in stock. Okay, we got it set in place, and now we're going to screw it down. Make sure we're lined up real good there. Now not too tight. Loosen that back up a little bit. Just a tad, so we can move it as needed. Okay, so we need to insert this hinge pin. You notice this kind of looks like a keyhole here. Narrow part, wide part. And this needs to go through, obviously, the wide part. This is a little slot here for the E-clip to fit into. That'll happen on this other side. So we're going to run this thing through. Okay, we have it now. I actually inserted it from the opposite side. I don't think it really makes a difference. But now we're going to put that E-clip right here in this groove. All right, we got her on there. If it'll do it. All right, we're on step 6. It says to attach the cover, but what they didn't mention yet is that we're supposed to remove this recoil spring assembly. Okay, and we're going to deal with a new recoil spring assembly here in just a little bit. So now we're going to attach the cover. Okay, so this is the Texas Weapons System cover right here. It's solid. metal. This isn't just picatinny that's been glued to it or screwed to it or anything like that. It's machined out of one single piece of metal. And so yeah, we're going to connect this with this AR style. It's a retained or captive pin, and it's going to assemble right into here. Might want to put in a little drop or two of oil for that later on, or even right now. Okay, these are called the hinge fork screws, these two right here. For ours, it came pre-assembled and pre-tightened from the factory. But if this doesn't fit into what they call the trunnion groove, which ours does, fits nicely. This is a washer 10, Romanian washer 10. If it doesn't, you loosen this up, move it backwards, forward a little bit as needed, so that it does mesh down into that trunnion groove correctly. We have just disassembled the recoil spring. Kind of the main point of that is removing that retainer right here. So what you need to do is grab hold of the spring itself, slide it back, and this is really handy with two people, and then this just slides right off of the existing little bars, those little pieces of metal that are running inside the recoil spring itself. Alright, this is the new assembly, all the new pieces. I can definitely tell it's stiffer. I don't know how it'll fire, if it'll actually fire any differently. This is an original piece. This, what I'm calling this little rod inside here, is an original piece. This one here, of course, came with the Texas Weapon Systems dogleg. I think this would be really difficult to do with just one person. What we had there is one person was holding this spring back while I worked this new system, this new piece on, and that made it actually pretty easy. Okay, last step is to replace the recoil spring. It's a hinged item now. Going to go ahead and put this in just like you normally would. Okay, a little action check here to show you what we're doing. First couple times that we did this, it's pretty dang tight. I notice it's loosening up just enough every time we do it. Nothing abnormal here. Open this up, right? Now, when you install optics on here, you're not going to want to be whacking this. You can do that right now to force it to close up, but that's not going to be good for any optics. So what I've been doing is position my hand about here. We're going to have some optics back here. The other hand, or the bottom of my hand, my fingers, are down here under the trigger guard. We're not going to get inside the trigger guard, and then you just squeeze. Done. I think that'll work real slick, even when we get optics on here. Well, there we have it. Installation and a test of the performance of this TWS Texas Weapon System dogleg rail. I mean, if you want to put optics on your AK, you've only got a couple of choices. And understand, of course, that the AK really was never designed to have optics placed on it. It's made to be a short range or close range weapon. Front sights, rear sights are iron sights. But today, a lot of folks like optics. Nothing wrong with having some optics on the rifle. So your options are actually kind of limited. You could take the existing dust cover, which is made out of pretty light aluminum though, or very, very thin steel, and you could put a picatinny on it by drilling through it. Maybe you could braze it or solder it or spot weld it together, something like that, but that's not going to be a very good solution. And even if you screwed it on, screwed the picatinny onto that existing dust cover, I could see that thing just moving over time and not being really that rigid. So that's not a good solution. The other solution is to use this attachment over here, which was the solution for putting some sort of optics on an AK. Not commonly done, but they thought about it and said, well, that's what we'll do, is have this frame over here. It's very stout, attached to the main body of the main receiver of the AK anyway. But all of the systems that I have seen that connect and then run, over the top of that dust cover are just not going to be a very rigid, very solid connection. And the last thing that you want to have happen is that your optics move from shot to shot. That's just terrible, and really gives you no advantage over the iron sights that are actually extremely reliable, and for how the gun was intended, they do just a fine job. So what Texas Weapon System did is they took that concept of having this dust cover, a picatinny, which is so commonly used today, picatinny mil-spec rail system attached to it. Well, why attach to it? The solution from Texas Weapon System is, let's just fabricate an entirely new dust cover out of aircraft aluminum, and as that is milled or fashioned from that aircraft, we're just going to build integral to it that picatinny. It's one piece. That's a great solution. I really like that. It is very solid. And I think it's probably the best solution out there today for mounting optics to your AK platform. A recap of the Texas Weapon System, the TWS dogleg. This is a Gen 3. I found it to be very, very well made, very sturdy, rigid, one-piece aircraft aluminum. Installation, I have no complaints whatsoever. The fit was really, really nice to this Wasser 10 Romanian-made AK. Accuracy with this thing, again, I can't complain. We shot off the bench, and the very first 3 shots were to the left and down a little bit. That's because we were still zeroing this sight. And after we got her all done, 3 last shots at the dead bullseye, you can see they're right in there in a less than 1 inch group. So this was shooting the Silver Bear ammunition that this gun really likes, Golden Bear, Silver Bear, and Brown Bear stuff. I give this, the Texas Weapon System, Gen 3 dogleg for the AK, thumbs up.